What's up, everybody? It's your man Harris here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to use the FPDF class in PHP to create beautiful looking PDFs using FPDF. Now, if you look over on the right, this is an invoice that I generated through FPDF on my server. So it generated this PDF, and it looks pretty nice. So I'm going to be showing you guys all of the techniques and tools that you need to know to be able to create beautiful PDFs yourself using FPDF. So I've created this FPDF tutorial here, and the link to it is in the description. Now, in this tutorial, the user just fills out their information here, their name, address, phone number, email, and they click submit, and it generates this PDF here for them. Now, the purpose of this PDF is basically just to be able to put in a logo up here, put in text content, and to create tables. So that will give you a good foundation of how to use FPDF, and I'll teach you how to move around the page and everything else. So that's how the tutorial works. So all the code for this is linked in the description. Now also, if you're a rookie to FPDF, I highly recommend that you use the code that I provided and not download FPDF yourself, because it can be a little bit confusing to set up initially. So definitely go on that link and download the code that I provided. Everything you need, including the FPDF class itself, is inside of the link. So just download all that code and place it on your web server. Also, if you want to do it yourself, you can go to fpdf.org, and on the download section, just download the latest version and the zip file. If you look over on the left-hand side of the page, you can find scripts here, which are just additional extensions for more features. We do use this table with MultiCell's extension, so that's already included in the link. So you don't have to worry about that, but you do need to download that if you want to use everything that we have in the tutorial. So table with MultiCells also needs to be downloaded. And then also here on the documentation side, you can find documentation for all of the functions provided within the FPDF class. So those are good things to know. Now, once you've downloaded the code that I've provided you, go ahead and place all of the code inside of your web server. So you want to put them where you would normally put your index.html file. You might want to just go ahead and start with a fresh server or move your existing files over and just put this index.html file inside of your web server. So put all of the code that I provided into the web server. So you should have index.html, the favicon, the create.php page, and the FPDF 186, or if you're watching this video later, it should be a later version, not 186, obviously. So go ahead and put that whole folder in there. So you should have those four things. Now let's take a quick look at our index.html file. So for this FPDF tutorial, all of this content here on the right is generated by this index.html file. So all of our data is here. Now make sure you put all of your data inside of your form, because we're going to be submitting this form to our create.php page over on the left. So everything that you want to be inside of your PDF needs to be inside of your form that you are submitting. The form action is our create.php page. Make sure the method is post, so you can post the data. And you want to set the target to be a blank page so that the PDF opens in a new tab. So once we click the submit button, it's going to take us to our PDF. And let's take a quick look at the create.php file we use to create this PDF. So inside of your PHP tag up here, you want to go ahead and require the mc_table.php file. So quick thing, if this isn't working for you, make sure you have this labeled correctly. So if you're using a different version than me, it's going to be a different number here. So it's going to be FPDF, maybe 200 if you're watching this video later. So make sure you have the correct version, the correct folder name of FPDF 186 or whatever your version number is, and then the mctable.php file. So you do need to have that inside of this FPDF 86 folder. If you downloaded my code, this is already taken care of for you. So if you open up your FPDF 186, you can see that the mctable.php file is already in here. Now, if you're not using mctable.php, you want to comment it out. If you don't want to use the table extension, you can comment that out and uncomment the top one, fpdf.php. So you should only be using one of these. That's why one of them is commented. But for this tutorial, we're going to be using the mctable.php. So if we take a look at that file, mctable.php, it's got a class in it that extends the FPDF class. So it basically has all of the functions that the original FPDF class has, plus the functions that the class extends. So it extends the existing FPDF class and adds additional functionality. So that's why we're using this mctable.php. So we're requiring that up here. And now we're assigning variables to all the data that we posted, right? So if we go back to the tutorial, all of these items here that we posted to the web server, we're assigning variable names to them. So we got our name, address, city, state, etc., phone, email. So we've got variables assigned for that. And now we can start creating our page, our PDF page. So we're going to create a variable called PDF, and we're going to assign it the PDF_MC_table class. And we're going to instantiate it by using these parameters. So we're going to be moving around in millimeters. So that's why we have this millimeters here. And we want an A4 structure for the page. So that just means we want the PDF to basically make a sheet of paper in the A4 standard, which down here you can see, it means that the page is going to be 210 millimeters wide by 297 millimeters long. And another thing to keep in mind is that FPDF has default margins of 10 millimeters. So that means your left margin, your top margin, and your right margin are all going to be 10 millimeters. So really, we only have 190 millimeters of space to work with over here, right? Because we're going to have on the left side here a little bit of margin, and on the right side a little bit of margin. So we're going to be moving around in millimeters. Next, we're going to set our title. So we're just going to call this the FPDF tutorial. And we're going to set the auto page break to true, and we're going to give it 10 millimeters. So if you look over at our PDF on the right, as you can see at the bottom, the page, this table here starts on a new page, and the 10 over here on the left just says start the new page once the content is over 10 millimeters. So if the content goes over the 10 millimeter margin at the bottom, go ahead and just start it on the next page. So that just sets our margins. So like if we change this to a 5, so if we change it to 50 and we refresh the page, as you can see, the content will start on the new page sooner, right? Because it's going to leave a 50 millimeter margin at the bottom. So that's why we want it to be 10. I believe it's 20 by default. Okay, so that's set. And we're going to go ahead and add our first page. So we do add page. You need to do this at least once. So once we've added the page, we're going to go ahead and set the font. So we're going to be using Arial. We want it to be bold with the B, and then the U just means underlined, and 16 pixels, or 16 font size. So now that we've got our font set, we're going to create our first cell. So inside of the cell, first you want to go ahead and state the width of the cell. So let me just go ahead and enable this real quick because it'll be easier for you guys to understand. And I'll go ahead and refresh. Now take a look on the right here at this FPDF tutorial up here, at this text right here in the page. As you can see, the box around it. So that 190 in the cell means that the cell itself should be 190 millimeters, because again, we set up here millimeters as our dimension. So 190 millimeters, because again, we have 10 millimeter margins at the left and the right, and our page is only 210 millimeters. So making it 190 millimeters covers our full page, and 5 is the height, so 5 millimeters. And the text inside is going to be FPDF tutorial. So as you can see up here, it says FPDF tutorial. And then this one is going to either, if you want to have this outline on the cell, as you can see, I enabled the outline. Since I don't want to have the outline, I change it to 0. So it's either 1 or 0. That changes the outline. So now that I changed it to a 0, it's going to have no outline. And 1 just means that it's going to start a new line after this cell has been created. So the 1 just starts a new line for us, since we want the content coming after to be on a new line. And the C just centers the content. So if I change this to an L, it's going to align it to the left, as you can see, or you can do an R for the right. And again, you can always go to the FPDF website and look at the documentation, and you can go to like cell and take a look at the options that for all the attributes you can assign. So all of the information is in the documentation. Yeah, so we've got that created. Now that we've got our cell, our title on the page up here, and we've got it centered, I'll go ahead and refresh the page. Okay, we want to go ahead and put our logo down. So we're going to use the image function, and we're going to say favicon.png. And again, we have our favicon in the folder, so I provided that for you guys. So that's going to be the file of the image. And here we set the height and the width, or the width and the height from the top of the page that the logo is going to be positioned at. So the logo is going to be 20 millimeters from the left of the page and 25 millimeters from the top of the page. So like, for example, if I change this to 50, if you look over here at the logo on the right, when I refresh the page, the logo is going to come down lower because I set it to 50. So it's going to be 50 millimeters from the top of the page. So that's why I set it to 25 millimeters, because I want it to have this position. So that's how you position your images in FPDF. Now, this -400 is, you basically just go ahead and set the size of your image. So if you have like a really big image like I provided, you can lower it by going negative. So you go -400, it'll lower the size. Like if I set it to -200 and I save and I refresh, the logo is going to be a lot bigger. So I have it at -400. I believe that sets the PPI, but I could be wrong on that. All right, so once we've got our logo set, we want to do the ln function. So ln just does basically a line break. So it basically just gives you space. So we want like 40 millimeters of space after our logo. So that's why we have 40 here. So if we change it to 10, as you can see, or actually, I'm sorry, it's going to be, the space is going to start at this cell up here. It's going to ignore the image. So it's going to be 10 millimeters below the title up here, or the cell we put up here, FPDF tutorial. So you can use ln to create space for yourself. I believe it creates a new line for you. So just give yourself some space using ln. So I'm going to keep that at 40, and that'll move my text where it needs to be. Now we're going to set our font again. So if you remember up here, we already set our font once, but we set the font to be bold and underlined, right? So everything from here on out is going to be Arial BU 16, so bold and underlined and 16 size. So since we only want the font to be bold, like we have over here on the left, we need to reset our font. So I set my font now to Arial bold 16. So as you can see, I don't have the underline here anymore. So we just have Arial bold 16. And then we want to go ahead and create another cell. So we're going to create a cell with the text name. As you can see on the right, we have our cell name. Now, when creating a cell, you're going to provide the width of the cell, again, the height of the cell, the text content, whether or not you want to show the border of the cell. So if I make this a 1, again, and I refresh, as you can see, my cell now has a border here. Now, the border is very useful for sizing. So if you want to get precise size, like if I made this cell, let's say 30 width instead of 18, if you look over on the right, the cell will be larger than the text content because it's 30 millimeters wide. So I always enable the border here so that I can see, where my content is ending. So I want to make sure that the width of my cell is as close to the width of my content as I need it. If you have variable content, like you'll see later, you want to go ahead and make that a little bigger. But for here, I want to make sure that my width of my content in my border is aligned properly so that these can be positioned next to each other. So that's why you use the width. So we've got that set. And then again, we're going to set our font again. So now we're just going to have Arial and it's going to be empty here. So no bold and no underline. So that's why you can see over here on the PDF, the name Fred is neither bold nor underlined. It's just normal because we've changed the font again. So we set the font. And we're going to go ahead and place our name using this MultiCell. Now, the MultiCell works similar to the cell, except it allows you to have content that goes over the cell. So if the content is larger than the width of the cell, it will drop the content down. So let me give you an example of that in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and change this back to a 0 so we can take this border off of name. All right, and let's take a look at MultiCell. So I'm going to go ahead and change the 0 here to a 1 so you can see the border. All right, so you see the border of Fred here where the name is. As you can see, I left a lot of space here. So if somebody was, for example, filling out a PDF on your website and they provided their name, obviously you need to account for people having longer names, so you want to leave them some room. Now, the great thing about MultiCell is that for a regular cell, for example, if like your name is longer, the cell will not expand for you. So MultiCell allows the cell to expand. So if I change the name here instead of Fred, if I go back to my tutorial and I change it to Fred and I just do 1, 2, 3, I just add a bunch of data to it and I submit again. As you can see, the data will go down. The content of the cell won't overflow the cell. So like if I had a regular cell here, this would all go to the right here. It would ignore the border. It would go over the border. So if you want to keep everything within your cell, all the data, you want to use MultiCell like I did down here. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off and go back to our regular data. And let's go ahead and save that again. Okay, so now you know how MultiCell works. So again, we set the width, the height, the content. So the content I just set to the variable PDF name, which if you go back up, right, we set that up here to take the name that we entered in index.html through the post method. So we've got a PDF name. So we went ahead and made that the content. And then we set the border here if you want to have a border or not. So if we want to go back to no border, we type in 0. And then you also can do your alignment. So you can do left, center, or right aligned. So I want all my content to the left. So I went ahead and selected the L. And I'm going to go ahead and save and refresh. Okay. So you get the general gist of it. So once we've got those two entered, so we have name and Fred entered in, we're going to take the ln again to give us some more room. So we want to go down and give 4 millimeters of room. So that's why we have this space here between address and name in the PDF. So like if I made this ln a 20, for example, and I refresh the page, you see how far address went from name because we gave it 20 millimeters of space. So, you just kind of base that off of aesthetically, what you think looks good. So I thought 4 millimeters looked good in terms of spacing. So I just gave it 4 millimeters. Now, again, we set the font. So since we want our next item, address here, to be bold, we set the font again to Arial bold, because again, our font is currently at Arial with no options. So every time you want to create font that's different than the font you just entered before it, you need to set the font again. So we set the font to bold, and we go ahead and do a cell called address here. So the address cell is here. We set the font again to not have any boldness, and then we place our variable PDF address that we get from our index.html page. So if you look over here on the PDF, you can see our address is 1001 Sky Avenue, which is what we entered in our HTML, right? So go ahead and delete that. So we have our 1001 Sky Avenue, and that gets printed to the page. And we basically follow that general pattern, right? We give it another space of 4 millimeters using ln, and then we set address to, and we put the the HTML data that we entered for address to onto the page. So we basically follow that same format until we finish with email. So if you go all the way down here, it basically just follows the same pattern. So once we get to email, we're going to provide 15 millimeters of space. So if you look over on the PDF, as you can see, there's a little bit of space here between email and the table that we're creating. So, obviously, for example, if we change that to 75, we refresh the page, there's going to be a lot of space between them. So, 15 seems about right for the tutorial. So we'll stay at 15. And now this is where we use that MC-table extension. So like this part of the tutorial, you can't do this without MC-table. So that's why we needed to download that additional extension, MC-table. Again, if you go over to fpdf.org and you go to scripts, that is table with multi-cells. So that needs to be downloaded. And again, I include that for you guys, so you don't have to worry about it if you're following the tutorial and you downloaded my code. So you don't have to do anything if you downloaded the code. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and create our table now. So we're going to go ahead and set the width of our table. So we want to have a table here, so we're going to say set widths, and we're going to make an array, and here we're going to set the width of each column. So if we look at our PDF here, as you can see, our first column here with the 1 in it has a width of 12 millimeters. So that's where we put the 12. And as you can see, the second column here is much wider than the first column because we gave it 71 millimeters. And then 3, is smaller because we gave it 25 millimeters. And then 4 is obviously 40 millimeters, and 5 is 42 millimeters. Now, again, remember that the width that we are working with on the page is 210 millimeters minus the 10 millimeter margin on the left and the 10 millimeter margin on the right. So really, we need this to equal 190. So this should be no greater than 190 when you add up all of these numbers here. So make sure that whatever array you use, and when you set the widths, you don't go over the 190 for the page. So, think about what data is going into each column when setting the widths of the columns. So we've got 5 columns here. And another thing to remember is this FPDF class is just a regular class. So you can use just regular PHP code to work with it. So here, I basically just filled the data inside of the table using just a regular for loop in PHP. So when I created, for example, my PDF up here, the more complex one, I used a lot of PHP. I used a lot of like if conditions. I did a lot of checks on my data. I queried my database. You want to use PHP the way you would normally use it to, organize things and get data and, do loops and if conditions and everything else. You just want to use the FPDF class to actually generate the content. So we've got the for loop here, which just says basically, let's create a variable I, set it equal to 1. As long as 1 is less than or equal to 40, go ahead and run this code here. So create a row, right? So we're going to go ahead and create a row, and inside of the array, fill each column with this data. So we're filling each column so like the first column will be filled by 1, which is this column up here that we set to the width 12. So if you look over here on the PDF, this first column is filled by the 1, right? And the second column is filled by the 2 because we have it listed here. So the 2 fills this 71 millimeter width column. So we have 5 columns up here, and we're filling the array with 5 items. So just the numbers 1 through 5. So like if I change this to, hello, just a string saying hello, and I save it, hello will pop up here, as you can see, and it will, if the content is too big for the column, it will increase the height of the row, as you can see here with the hello. So I just decided for the tutorial to just fill it with numbers to make it easy. And again, since the for loop is running here, it's going to run 40 times as we set it right here. So it's going to create 40 rows for us. So that's how you would create a table. And if you were, going to pull data from your database or use data that you had pulled from the page, right, you would maybe do like something like, document.get elements by class name, get all the elements that you want in the table by class name, and then, loop through the class or loop through the array if you put all the elements by class name into an array, for example, and then you loop through the array and then you fill the table with that data. So you have to use regular PHP to manipulate your data to get it to properly go into your table, right? If you want to actually use data instead of just like, if you want to use data that your user entered onto your website. So get creative with the PHP. But like I said, again, that, this is good for the tutorial. Now, when you're done, all you want to do is just do this output function here. So all we're going to be really doing for the output function, and I'm just going to call the file test.pdf. So when the user downloads the file, so when they generate the PHP, as they have up here, and they go to, save it, it's going to give it the test name. So test.pdf. So you can name the file that the user gets when they download the file. I don't remember what the I is, but we can take a really quick look at it. Output here, and like I said, you can you can look over here at the documentation. So I'm at the documentation for output, and the I says it sends the file inline to the browser. D, send to the browser and force a file download. So here on this I parameter, you can replace it with D, F, or S. So, you need to get familiar with going into the documentation if you want to do something different. And again, this is more just getting you started and getting you used to how FPDF works. This should make it much easier for you to understand the documentation now that you've got kind of a good foundation in some of the basic principles. So if you want to do more advanced stuff, like I did with my PDF, you definitely need to go into the documentation a little bit and figure out some stuff, and maybe take a look at the additional scripts if there's functionality that's not initially included. As you can see, people over here have made invoices and reports, so you can use some of their existing scripts to generate more complex stuff, and they also have examples on them where you can like download a preview or an example they already made for you. So yeah, that's how you use FPDF to make PDFs using PHP. Again, to use this tutorial correctly, you need to be on your server, right? So you need to do this tutorial on your server. Yeah. And make sure you guys check out our sponsor for this video, invoicebell.app, where you can create a free account and bill customers. You can create invoices, estimates, and quotes, and you can make those PDFs that I showed you, and you can save the documents to your cloud. It's got a really nice template, and it's super easy to use, and comes with free storage, so unlimited storage for free. So make sure you guys check that out at invoicebell.app. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you have a great night.